Am I wrong for holding my wedding at the same venue as my first husband's funeral?
Ugh, that's a funny sentence.
Last summer, my first husband passed away after being in a car accident a month before. The doctors expected him to pull through, yet be paralyzed from the waist down, but he already had health problems and the trauma from the accident ultimately prevailed. I and his parents organized a funeral at a spacious old Catholic cathedral. I kept thinking to myself the whole time that this place is too beautiful for a funeral. That's what you were thinking about when your husband was in his casket, was that this place is too beautiful for a funeral? That's weird. For some reason, it felt wrong having such a sad occasion there. I even remember wishing that I had married my first husband there instead of the outdoor wedding we had. You're weird. Why are you thinking about that stuff? Fast forward to early 2022. I reunited with an ex-boyfriend of mine from years before. We started dating again, and before we knew it, we were engaged. I've been criticized a lot for how fast I moved on, but I guess everyone heals differently. We started planning for the wedding, and we decided that we'd have it at the same cathedral where my first husband's funeral was held. I still am in contact with my first husband's parents, and they were happy for me when I told them I was dating and then when I got engaged. In a phone call, my first husband's mother asked about the wedding, so I said that they could come if they wanted to. She seemed a bit taken aback at first, so I totally thought I screwed up, but then she said she'd love to. I don't know how to explain what happened other than to just write the conversation down as well as I could remember. Me. We will be marrying at this, insert name of the cathedral. Silence. Her. I just can't believe it. Me. Believe what? Silence. Her. I'm sorry, this is just appalling to me. Me. I want to have our wedding there in honor of my first husband. I would have married him there if I knew about this place. Her. You're moving on too quickly. You need to slow down. Think about how my son would feel. You can't replace him. Me. I'm not replacing him. I'm trying to keep his memory alive. I found love again, but I will never forget him. Her. You moved on. You've moved on. My son hasn't moved on. My son will never move on. And I'm sure if he were alive, he'd want to. Me. I'm sorry. And then she hangs up the phone. I haven't spoken to her or her husband since. I still plan on having my wedding there, but it just puts a bad taste in my mouth knowing that my first husband's parents are against it. But after all, they aren't involved in the wedding anyways, so I don't see why they should have a say. I wish they'd at least support me because I've been through hell and back. I'm in a better place now and they don't like to see me happy. But I also feel kind of selfish because they aren't happy. So am I the asshole?
Storytime about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was really me. Disclaimer is not my storytime, was sending me on Instagram. The funny thing is that when my boyfriend and I got together, I did not want the relationship. He begged me for 6 months to be his girlfriend. And you see, the only reason why I didn't want to was because I knew that he was a player. Every single one of my friends had basically gone out with him. I was just the last girl in the group to go out with him because I always kept saying no. And looking back, he was definitely obsessed with me because I never gave in to him. I was the girl that he couldn't have. During those 6 months, he would hit me up on Instagram every single day. Anytime I posted a story, he would automatically reply to it. He would like and comment on all of my pictures. We also had a lot of mutual friends, so we would end up at the same events and parties. And every time that he would see me in public, he would zero in on me. He would basically ignore all the other girls at the party and make me feel like I was the only one there. And he would constantly compliment me and tell me how beautiful I was, how attracted to me he was, how I was just so different from all the other girls that he had gone out with. Trust me, I knew that he was love bombing me, but eventually after 6 months, I was like, he's gotta be honest. So I decided to give him a chance. And let me tell you, he has been the perfect boyfriend. He's so sweet and considerate. My parents absolutely adore him. And my mom never likes anybody. See, I come from a Latino family. One day I decided to make a second Instagram account. It was just an inspiration account. I posted cute outfits of other people I liked, makeup, nails. So one day I see my boyfriend in my DMs. Part 2 of how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram and not knowing it was actually me. Disclaimers did on my Storytime was sending me on Instagram. That's when I opened up my account to see that my boyfriend had DM'd me. First I thought he was joking. When I clicked into the message and I read it, my heart and my stomach sank. He was taking a shot. He thought that I was some sort of influencer. Now when I created the second account, I was already with him. But I really didn't tell him that I was creating it. It was just for fun for myself. I did start gaining followers. I did put in a lot of work into this account, but it was pretty much a visual diary just for me. It just so happens that other girls liked the aesthetic and I started gaining a lot of followers. I had about 10,000. But here's my theory. Since my account is probably listed to be in the area that he is, probably popped up on one of his mutual lists or his explore page or something like that, because I was trying to figure out how he found the account. The message read, "Hey beautiful, I really love your pictures and love your style. I'm also really into fashion. Lol, no he's not. And I would love to take you out on a date. I know all the good spots around the city. Let me know if you're down." So when I clicked on my boyfriend's profile and realized that he had hidden all of the pictures we had together. If he had DM'd any girl and she went to look at his profile, she would automatically assume that he's single because he doesn't have a picture of another girl. Instead of freaking out and calling him, I decided to keep cool. Instead, I called my mom. She told me to play along with the conversation. So that's what I did. Messaged him back and said, "Wow, I really love your pictures and your style too. What's your favorite designer?" He replied, "Louis Vuitton." Ew. By the end of the conversation, we had a date for that night. And I showed up. Part 3 is up. I told him about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was me. Disclaimer is not my story time. sending me on Instagram. At the end of the conversation he thought he was having with some other girl, we had decided to go on a date. And like I said, I was playing along, so I was super nice to him. I complimented all the clothes that he wore. I told him that he looked so attractive in his pictures and that I was really looking forward to meeting him. He chose a restaurant downtown, and of course he did because I live nowhere near that area. In fact, he and I never go out on dates there. So he knew that he wouldn't see anybody he knew. Here's where it gets actually really funny. This man sent a picture of the outfit he wanted to wear. A brown fedora with a Louis Vuitton monogram on it, a Louis Vuitton belt, black pants, and a black shirt. So I replied saying, that's perfect. I'll wear a black dress and my favorite Louis Vuitton purse. But I was still heartbroken. Here's what I did. I asked my mom to come with me to the restaurant. Her and I did our makeup, our hair, and we got dressed up really, really nice. And I decided to wear a black dress. My mom actually happened to have an old Louis Vuitton purse in her closet that she never wore, so I grabbed it. My mom and I show up to the restaurant and my boyfriend is already there. So I decided to walk in and turn around, so that way he could only see my back. Mom decided to stay outside of the restaurant, but she knew to come in as soon as he saw me. I suddenly feel a tap on my shoulder, and that's when I turn around. He says, oh hey babe, what are you doing here? The look on this man's face was of pure fear. That's when I hand him my phone so that he could see that the account that he was messaging was actually mine. That's when he says, you lied to me? He was mad at me for pretending to be somebody else. Then he started apologizing, and then he said that he knew the whole time and that he was just joking around. I broke up with him and haven't spoken to him since.
Am I wrong for hiding my girlfriend's heels before going to my sister's wedding? To start off, I'm going to mention that I'm your typical 5'6" short guy. You can't say typical and then 5'6" in the same sentence. I hate myself. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. I hate myself for it. I'm openly insecure about it and have exhausted all solutions to fix the issue. I met my girlfriend 6 months ago. She met my family and they all embraced her right away. My sister invited her to the wedding and mentioned including her in the wedding photos. I asked my girlfriend what shoes she was going to wear, and she showed me a pair of high heels that would have basically made her look 2 times taller than me. I asked if she could consider wearing sandals instead, since there was going to be photos and I didn't want to look like a gnome sitting next to her. She called me silly and brushed off my concerns, which was not appreciated. The day of the wedding, I hid her pair of heels. She has only one set in the apartment because she moved out all the old ones after I asked her to. She tried looking for them and really seemed to think something strange happened. I started telling her to hurry up so that we can go to the venue on time, and she ended up wearing flats as a replacement. You're bad, man. Everything went well, and I gave her high heels back once we got home. She was shocked when she saw me holding them. I admitted hiding them for the reasons I stated above, and she got mad at me and said that I shouldn't have done that and forced her to wear sandals that completely didn't match with the dress. She kept saying I got what I wanted, but she will forever look awkward in these photos wearing those sandals. I do think she has every reason to be upset with me, but what was I supposed to do after I made my wishes clear and she brushed them off knowing full well how I felt about those high heels? So, am I the asshole? I really thought of it as a harmless move, and I think she might have overreacted. Yo, dude, are you serious? Do you know how you sound right now? Am I the asshole for telling my sister she would have been a terrible mother? I, 17 male, have 2 sisters, Alice 29 and Miranda 33. I'm much closer to Alice than I am to Miranda. Miranda is also not on good terms with our parents. Alice has 4 kids and is currently expecting child number 5, while Miranda can't have children, which her ex divorced her for. Miranda is very successful in life. She has a nice apartment, works a good job, and earns a decent amount of money. Alice, on the other hand, is struggling financially. She had her first child right out of high school and got pregnant with her second soon after. So she decided to become a stay-at-home mom for her children while her boyfriend provides for them. Me and my parents try to help them out as much as possible, be it childcare or money, whatever she needs. I love my nieces and nephew. I take them to the park and play with the older ones. I really enjoy it. Miranda doesn't help out with them. She says it's because she's too busy. Well, she works long hours, but she doesn't have kids, so I don't know what she does on the weekends. She also doesn't help out financially, which I find unfair, since she makes so much money and all she does is spend it on herself, although she does give us very nice gifts for Christmas and birthdays. So here comes the part where I may have been an asshole. You were already an asshole, so let's see what this is about. We got on the topic of Christmas presents, and I told her some of the stuff I wanted. She nodded and said she would give our parents a coupon for a much-needed vacation, and Alice some clothes she had mentioned, and also some new boots and jackets for her kids. I was a little stunned she didn't have any more for Alice, so I asked, why do you only get Alice the bare minimum? You can afford to help out more and you refused to out of spite. Miranda looked at me and laughed. She said it wasn't her business to feed 6 people, and that Alice was old enough to make her choices and live with the consequences. She knew what she was getting herself into and that she wouldn't pay Alice's way through life just because she kept having children she couldn't afford. I agree. I actually called me a bitch, but I agree. I was stunned at how cold she reacted. I asked her how she could live her life being so selfish and uncaring, and she got angry and told me, listen kid, there are some things you're way too young for to be discussing with me, and this is one of those. Drop the subject or get out. I agree with her. What the fuck? You're 17. You don't even have a real job. You haven't gone to school. You don't know the hardships of life. At that point, like, you cannot tell your grown-ass sister who worked her ass off to get where she is how to spend her money. I got really frustrated with her and said something I probably shouldn't have. No wonder your husband divorced you. Even if you could have children, you would be a terrible mother. Miranda got very quiet and told me to leave and never come back. She has now blocked me on everything, and though I don't agree with her not helping out, I'm starting to feel guilty for saying what I said. So, am I the asshole?
My boyfriend of 8 years cheated on me with his best friend's fiancé and is now begging me for a second chance. I still love him, but I don't know what to do. Background. I met my boyfriend in college when we had a class together. He was struggling because of his party lifestyle, but I, being a studious introvert, was thriving. He begged me to help him, and I relented eventually. I hated his guts, but for some reason, he made me fall in love with him. He was such an open book too, and waited patiently for me. I didn't let him kiss me till 4 months into dating, and didn't sleep with him till our 1-year anniversary. He was my first, and I really wanted to be sure I was giving my virginity to someone who truly loved me. I didn't ask him to, but he slowly gave up partying and drinking for me, and we both found a new friend group in college who we've maintained to this day. He gave up everything willingly, because he said he'd rather spend time at home with me. The one thing from his past that he didn't give up, though, was his childhood best friend, who we'll call Max. Max always hated me. I think he blames me that he sees my boyfriend only a few times a month, and that he isn't fun anymore. He also openly questions our relationship in front of both of us, and says stuff like, "You'll come to your senses eventually," when talking to my boyfriend. I told him I wasn't comfortable, so since then, he never let Max around me, but they still hung out, and I really didn't mind because I trusted him. Okay, so this is what happened recently. Max got engaged to his long-term on-again, off-again girlfriend and invited both of us over to celebrate. It would have been just the 4 of us. Restrictions have been lifted in our area as long as contact and amount of people involved were kept to a minimum. I declined, which, in retrospect, was a huge mistake. Boyfriend offered to stay with me, but I told him he didn't need to, and I'd understand if he wanted to support Max, even though I despised the guy. Again, this was a mistake in retrospect. The next morning, my boyfriend came home crying. We are living together. He was still clearly hungover, so I bathed him and put him to bed. When he woke up a few hours later, he told me everything. Apparently, he got really drunk at the party. Max's fiancé, who we'll call Homewrecker or HM, was very flirty with him the whole night and helped him when he passed out. Next thing boyfriend says he remembers was when he woke up, Homewrecker was giving him a BJ while he was naked. He says he was too drunk and just went along with it while Max watched. According to boyfriend, they're into the whole hot wife thing, whatever that means. Next thing boyfriend says he remembers was waking up naked next to Homewrecker with a bunch of used condoms around them. He rushed home after that. My heart is breaking right now, guys, and I really don't know what to do. He's been begging me for a second chance, even showed me he blocked Max and Homewrecker on everything. He promised never to contact them again. He also swears to not drink when I'm not around anymore, and that he would keep his phone unlocked so I can look through it whenever I wanted, no questions asked. He kept telling me how much he regrets it, and how much he loves me, and that I'm the only one. The sad thing is, I believe him. This man was my first everything, and I feel like my world is just crumbling around me. A few weeks ago, we were thinking about getting married and how many kids we wanted. Now, I can't even look at him without my heart breaking in two. This all happened a few days ago, and I've barely left the room. He's giving me space, but he's also doing the little things that makes me fall for him again. He keeps the house clean, he's been cooking me the food I like, and leaving short love notes beside it on the dinner table. I'm lost right now. I so desperately want to forgive him, but every time I look at him, I can't shake off the image of him being with another woman. I know I was never his first, but he kept promising me that I was going to be his last, and he broke it. Despite everything though, deep down, I still love him. Guys, I don't know where to go from here. I'm crying just typing this out, but I don't have anyone to talk to about this. Usually, when problems this big come up in my life, he's the one I turn to for help. I love him, but I don't know if I can trust him anymore. What should I do? Will couples counseling help? Should I just cut my losses and end it? He seems very remorseful, and he did confess to the whole thing immediately after. Should I give him a chance? Sorry for the long rant, I'm just lost right now. And now in the comments, just a different perspective here. I know you are very hurt, but is your boyfriend okay? Passing out drunk and finding yourself naked and in a sexual situation suggests he did not give his consent. When that happens to a girl, we call it the R word. If the situation is as I understand it, he was not then having sex. His body was being used without informed consent. He was being taken advantage of. Another thing to consider is, given his inebriation, it may not have even been his used condoms. Men who are drunk enough to pass out are not always able to perform, certainly not to fulfillment and multiple times. I don't feel like he deliberately broke a promise to you. I think he was violated, not just his body, but also because he trusted his friend. This. He seems so sorry and ashamed and regretful. It doesn't seem like he meant to do this, and honestly, just reading this, my heart breaks for the both of you. To me, it seems like he was sexually assaulted at least. In no way could he have given consent that drunk. I understand that it will be hard for you as well, knowing that something happened, but I don't think he's at fault here. It seems like he was taken advantage of in a drunken state. OP, he came crying to you, confessing he was sexually assaulted by his childhood best friend's fiancé while the best friend watched. I get you being hurt. Your emotions are valid too, but he needs you and he needs a therapist. Also encourage him to file a report for sexual assault. He did not cheat on you. And now onto the update. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for those who gave me really solid advice in my last post. A lot has happened in the last few days. Sorry I haven't been replying to any of you, I just didn't think that I was in the right headspace to actually hold a meaningful conversation. Rest assured, I did read all of your replies, even the really mean ones. So where do I begin? Well, I think some of you would be delighted to know that he left me for not being supportive. Sucks to be me, I guess. I guess you guys were right. I am a sucky girlfriend. He's now off to be with his brand new supportive girlfriend. Nah, just kidding, but some of you would have wanted that to happen, right? So here's what really happened. After reading some of your comments, I started to see things from a different perspective. I never really thought of it as anything other than cheating, and it didn't help that when he came home to me that morning, he claimed to have cheated on me, and I guess my mind just started going to a dark place where logic goes out of the window. It's definitely not an excuse, but I really wasn't in the right mindset after he said he cheated. I guess it was after the realization that this man would never willingly hurt me is when all the anger and pain of being cheated on was washed away. I couldn't really bring myself to talk to him at first. He was on the couch blankly staring at whatever was on TV. He looked empty. I sat beside him and told him that I had no intentions of breaking up. Well, he came to life almost instantly, and before I knew it, his arms were wrapped around me. He was shaking, and I could tell he was crying. I was too. Remember when I said I felt my world was crumbling around me? Well, for the first time in what seemed like forever, I could feel it starting to fall back into place. I didn't realize how much a simple embrace can be so calming. Everything was starting to feel right again. Then we talked. He apologized again for cheating, and when I told him I didn't think he cheated, he had a puzzled look on his face. I asked him if he gave consent, and he said no. I tried to explain I guess he still doesn't realize that he was actually taken advantage of. He said the first thing that came to mind after what happened was that he cheated and was so afraid of losing me. This man, after being R-worded, first thought of how much he betrayed me instead of how he was betrayed himself. I was floored. He said his first response had to be to win me back, which is why he's been going the extra mile in the last few days, taking care of me from a distance. When it was my turn to speak, I told him how sorry I was for not being supportive. I jumped to conclusions without actually thinking about it clearly, which was pretty out of character for me. A few more exchanges after that, and the conversation shifted to Max and Homewrecker. I told him that I never wanted him anywhere near Max or her again, and he agreed. I've always thought that he was a bad influence, but I never thought that he'd take it this far, so I never stopped him from seeing his ex-best friend. He showed me his phone, which didn't have a lock anymore. He said he blocked both of them on everything, but wanted to keep the open phone policy. He said it so that I can be sure he isn't back in touch with Max. I urged him to file a police report, but he was against it. He said that even if he was taken advantage of, he couldn't bring himself to do it. I didn't really know about it at first, but his family and Max's family had a very long history of friendship. Their mums were college best friends, and their dads worked together. Not only were the two of them very close, even their families were close. I thought they were just neighbors, but it was more than that. I didn't know because every time I visit his family, the topic was never brought up, and I haven't really met any of Max's family except for his little sister, who came by to play with boyfriend's little brother. He said he didn't want to ruin decades of friendship and would be content with just going no contact with Max. He's getting tested later today, and I hope that cow didn't give my man anything. I'm also pretty confident that my boyfriend didn't get the homewrecker pregnant, cause Max absolutely hates children, so I'd imagine homewrecker would be on birth control given how many dudes she sleeps with. Boyfriend and I came to the conclusion that Max most likely set the whole thing up to break us apart so he can have his best friend back. They used to be partners in crime after all, when it came to parties and to picking up women. I would like to point out that I did not force him to change. He himself chose to do so, but I know he did it for me, which just makes me fall in love with him even more. When we first met, he was still the playboy party animal he was, but he told me after hanging out with me for a few weeks that he didn't really feel like sleeping around anymore. I didn't really believe him at first, obviously. I've also noticed that a few people were bashing me for making him wait 1 year for sex. I'm sorry, I just have different views. I believe that sex is for people who love each other, so I wasn't willing to sleep with anyone that I wasn't deeply in love with and didn't love me back. I don't judge people who sleep around. My boyfriend has a high body count, but I don't really hold it against him, but back then, I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't just a girl he bangs or a conquest, but someone who he actually loves and sees a future with. Considering his past, I was very skeptical for a while, and I had my walls up the entire time, but he slowly tore them apart, and I'm glad he did. That reluctant yes, when he first asked me out, was, and still is, one of the best decisions I have ever made. Max's plan had the opposite effect. It's rough now, but I can see this experience making our relationship even stronger. I love him more than ever, believe it or not, and I'm sure he feels the same way. The last few days have taught us both how shitty our lives would be without the other. I guess it made us value each other more. Not that either of us took the other for granted. And yes, we are both getting therapy, both individually and as a couple. To be honest, I'm still shaken over the whole thing. Even when we cuddle, I can still imagine Homewrecker having her way with him, and I can't help but cry about it. If I'm still shaken up by the whole thing, I can only imagine how much worse it is for him, but I'll be there for him every step of the way. I know he didn't cheat. I know he won't break my heart. I know that he loves me. I know that I love him. It's hard right now, but knowing those facts makes me confident we can see this through. One Redditor pointed it out that we were soulmates, and I like to think that we are. I can't see myself being with anyone but him. Thanks again for all of your advice and for making me see things differently. I'll try to reply and answer questions when necessary and when I can. And now in the comments, I'm glad that it worked out this way. Thank you for supporting him in the end. I'm a male survivor myself. This gives me hope that we can truly start to be taken seriously soon. Thanks for updating us. I hope both of you will pull through wonderfully. Kinda scared that you'll still be in contact with Max because their families are close. Since flipping the genders, any girl having an abuser as a family friend who still hangs around is a scary thing. But as long as you guys stick together, I do wish you guys the best. And OP says, future mother-in-law and father-in-law hate Max, so he barely shows up for get-togethers. They have always seen him as a bad influence, and rightfully so. Small chance that we'd run into him in the future, and if there is any chance, we'll just avoid them or skip the event. I'm glad you managed to change your perspective, but please for the love of God file a police report. This is more important than decades of friendship. And OP says, I don't want to push him. He's dealing with a lot right now, and ultimately it's his decision. I'm going for an angle that you may not have considered, because you sound like a nice person. When Max realizes his plan didn't work, he may encourage Homewrecker to file a report against your boyfriend. At this point, the reporting it to the police is for his protection from her. Wow, with sociopathic friends like that, who needs enemies? Though I do wonder how he will maintain no contact when Max's family is so close to him, and how will he explain that Max won't be invited to the wedding / be his best man. And I bet Max did damage control and told everyone that OP is a controlling B-word and destroyed their friendship, just to make himself the victim. I hope he doesn't damage OP's relationship with her in-laws. Our next post is titled, Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend that he can't date younger and then get upset about my budget apartment? So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first, and I had some doubts that we would work out together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing, and the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5, and the sound of the girls in the apartment to either side of mine watching telenovas till midnight, taking work calls all day, and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls, so I would never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go to speak to them or have me text them, and I said no. For example, one of the early times when he stayed over, we went to bed at around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud, and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in, and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs, and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot, young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights, nobody's having screaming fights, nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it, and I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money, and he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it, and even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, "Okay, boomer," or tell him that if he wanted to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. Am I the asshole for what I said to my boyfriend about my apartment? I don't think so at all. I think if he wants to complain about all these things, he can go to the effort of driving you to his apartment and back, and then dropping you back home. He can't expect the best of both worlds when you're not in a position to do that for him. Neither are you in a position to facilitate your own transport to his place. Also, that hot young 22-year-old is cringe. Yuck. Don't say that. Don't say the quiet part out loud. That disgusts me. Get out of here with your creepiness. Anyway, I don't think you're an asshole in this situation. I think you're doing the best with what you have, and I can't blame you for that. So I'm gonna say you are not the asshole. And now in the comments, not the asshole. Women his age don't put up with that behavior. Judging by all of the relationship posts on this sub alone, plenty of women his age put up with that behavior. Unfortunately, you're right. The 22-year-old putting up with this will become a 35-year-old putting up with it if she doesn't wise up. People wonder why the advice given is to dump them in the relationship advice subs. Many of the situations are very similar to this. Less age gaps though, where the partner is just a disrespectful asshole that communication won't fix. I don't get Reddit's obsession with we shouldn't jump to dumping people. Wrong. We should absolutely normalize getting out of unhealthy relationships. I don't know, man. I think your initial instinct that this wouldn't work out was right, but for more reasons than just age, he seems to have a very low tolerance for mild inconvenience. Not the asshole. Yeah, as someone in their 30s who still likes apartment living, I get the impression this dude wants a level of soundproofing that isn't possible, period. If you can hear people taking work calls, watching TV, and making breakfast, the soundproofing is just bad. I empathize with him because I hated apartment living. I felt like I could never live my life because I'd be a bother to my neighbors, and conversely, I would get annoyed at my neighbors when the fault really lies with the shitty landlords that built these buildings as cheap as possible and not give a single F about sound control between units. Not the asshole. Do you know why a 35-year-old dates a 22-year-old? Because women his age don't put up with his childish behavior, but a 22-year-old is more likely to be easily guilt-tripped. Good on you for standing up for yourself. Honestly, you might have a common hobby, but you're in very different places in your life, which can make a relationship difficult if you are not both ready to be understanding. Living in an apartment comes with that burden of hearing other people. I'd point out to him that they probably hear y'all being intimate, but they don't bother you about it. If you can hear that much of what's going on in their apartment, they can hear just as much of what's going on in yours. I just want to say this wisdom doesn't come from just being smart, it comes from once thinking that I was just so mature that I attracted older men. But I got carded until I was 30, and based on other life decisions, I can guarantee you that I am not that mature. Live and learn. And now to the edit/update. A lot of comments are asking if we could stay at his house. It is not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house, then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to just visit me in the city. Edit 2, a lot of people in the comments are saying technically 35 is a millennial and not a boomer. I know that. I'm using boomer as a joke, or a figure of speech, to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It's a common figure of speech to say okay boomer to someone who's acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. And edit 3, this is the update. I googled his property records for his house and he co-owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy crap. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, a great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. And now to the comments. As soon as it was mentioned that they never go to his place, I just out loud said, "Girl, bet he's married." Seriously, my girlfriend lives a 30-ish minute drive away from me and I don't complain. I dislike having to drive longer than 20 minutes most of the time. If he lived a large town over and it was like a 1.5 hour drive, I could see that as being an issue. I once dated a guy who lived an hour and 15 minutes away from me, and he would come and pick me up on Fridays and drop me back on Sundays. I was saving up for a car at that time and didn't need one where I lived. In September, we will have been married 10 years. Oh lord, the strength to not go sleuthing for the answer. I couldn't have let it go. I'd have known his mailman's shoe size, and how his kindergarten teacher takes her coffee, sugar, no milk, before the night turned into day. Yeah, I'd need to know the truth. Funny that literally the title, like knowing somebody was having this problem, had those suspicions. It's kind of beautiful how naive we all are when we're in the middle of the storm, and sometimes just putting it into words lifts your head from the clouds, and suddenly you see the storm. But I still want to throw a lightning bolt at him. Many years ago, I was so angry at a married guy who presented himself as single on a dating site that I spent a couple hours digging around until I figured out his real name, where he really worked, his wife's name, where his wife worked, his daughter's names, and their dog's name. Told him that if he wanted to be single, get a divorce and be single. But if I ever saw his profile again, I'd absolutely share copies of his profile, his sexts, his photos, and everything else with the world. The only thing I'm taking away from this is getting to the middle of the post thinking that, well, you're young dating someone old as F, and then realizing I'm the same age as the old as hell guy. I am the same age. But you know better than to chase the hot 22-year-olds. 22-year-olds have hopes, dreams, and plans like they're gonna change the world. It's like listening to a small kid talking about Santa Claus. I don't have the heart to rain on their parade. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of it down below, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!
Storytime about how I married my blind date after knowing each other for 2 weeks. After I broke up with my ex who cheated on me 4 times, I swore off men. But my friends and family were constantly telling me that I should at least try dating other people. I went 2 full years without dating anyone, and it was the best decision I ever made. Instead of going out on dates, I decided to take that time to work on myself. I prioritized myself and started doing the things that I've always wanted to do. For example, I always wanted to learn how to play the piano, so I put myself into piano classes. I also started taking belly dancing classes, and I signed up to Pilates. I also decided to focus on my mental health because I realized that I always depended on validation from men. It was the happiest I'd ever been. My family even saw the changes in me, and my mom told me that maybe it was time for me to start dating. Last year, my sister signed up to a bunch of dating apps, and she actually met some really good men. I really thought about it long and hard, and I decided to sign up for one too. And I told myself that I would take it slow and easy. Finally, I went on my first date. It didn't go very well because my date only talked about himself and didn't ask me any questions. But then my second date was this amazing guy. And I kid you not, it was love at first sight. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I married my blind date after knowing each other for only 2 weeks. So I walk into the restaurant and I know what he looks like. He was already sitting at the table, but as soon as we locked eyes, it was instant attraction. But not just attraction, it was love. I honestly don't know how to describe it. It was this feeling I'd never felt before. When I sat down at the table, we instantly connected. We talked about everything, from our childhoods up until that point. We talked about school, friends, even our favorite foods, favorite colors, places we wanted to visit. I'm talking about everything. We even talked about our family problems, which I had never done that with anyone else. We basically ordered the entire menu. And over the next 5 hours, we talked and ate and laughed. You know when there's moments of silence in a conversation, and sometimes it's awkward? There was none of that. We were constantly talking and asking each other questions. The restaurant actually had to tell us to go home. When we said goodbye, he asked me if he could take me to breakfast the next day. And of course, I said yes. As I was driving home, I knew that this was the guy I wanted to marry. For the next week, we hung out almost every single day when we weren't working. And we texted each other day and night. He would send me paragraphs. By the end of the week, he asked me if he could meet my parents. We had a wonderful dinner and my parents loved him. He put so much effort into talking to them and even brought them gifts. The following day, I met his family, and they loved me too. The following Monday, he asked me to move in with him, and I said yes. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I married my blind date after only knowing each other for 2 weeks. After 1 week of knowing each other, he asked me to move in. Like I said, my parents loved him, but when I told him that we were going to move in together after knowing each other for 1 week, they thought it was a terrible idea. But there was no way I was backing out on moving in with him. I told him that this was a risk I was willing to take. I was a grown adult, so I had the final word. That very same week, I started moving all my stuff in. After living together for 3 days, we were having so much fun. I was living with my best friend. We would tell each other everything. We decided to host a dinner for our family and friends. His family got along really well with my family, and his friends ended up loving me. By the end of that second week, my boyfriend was talking about getting married, and I said it would be a dream to marry him. And guess what? The next day, he takes me out for an early breakfast. While we're sitting at the restaurant, the server brings over a box, and he tells me to open it. And inside was a beautiful emerald ring. I had told him on our first date that emeralds were my favorite stones. He got down on one knee and asked me to marry him, and I said yes. In order to avoid having to convince our families, we went straight to the court and got married the following day. Yes, I know it's totally crazy, but I am so happy. We've been married now for 3 years. We've traveled to 8 different countries, and we also decided to have children. I never thought I would marry the man of my dreams after 2 weeks of knowing him, but my risk paid off. What should we name our first baby?
Storytime about when I woke up to a hooded figure standing over me. Due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was off-season. It was late November, the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does this place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house-looking buildings arranged in a sort of sort of horseshoe shape around a walkway with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you'd reach the room that we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led back to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. After a day of exploring and having just finished dinner, it was time for a cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left turn and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking and see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. In that moment, we were both frozen with fear. Part 2, when I woke up to a hooded figure standing over me. We were on an island in the middle of the ocean and woke up to see a hooded stranger looming over us. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like the movies, where the characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago, the series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly, we were at the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him! Get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you!" I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." So basically, some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie thought it was me, assumedly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs the kid, who was now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes.
Am I the asshole for refusing to pay the babysitter for new glasses after my daughter broke her old ones? I'm male 35, am a widower with 2 kids, 9 and 11. I recently got back to work and since I work night shifts, I had to get a babysitter. My coworker recommended a relative and it's been going great except for a few days ago. The babysitter called me and told me that my 9-year-old daughter broke her glasses. I got home, heard both sides of the story, and came to the conclusion that it was an accident. But the babysitter said she broke them intentionally after she refused to let her outside. I asked my 11-year-old daughter and she said the sitter's story is accurate, but she and her sister have beef. I figured she set her up and apologized for the misunderstanding. She insisted there wasn't one and asked me to pay. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay the babysitter for new glasses after my daughter broke her old ones? She said there was no misunderstanding and asked me to pay for new glasses. I was taken aback by her request and told her I thought we talked this out, and that we ruled it an accident. I apologized but refused and said it was unfair to expect me to pay, especially since she didn't pay attention to keep her glasses safe. The babysitter argued with me, then started crying, swearing that my daughter broke them to get back at her. My 11-year-old sided with her, but my 9-year-old said she is only siding with the babysitter for her own benefits. I then asked the babysitter to leave. She got my coworker involved and she's saying I need to take responsibility and pay for them. I apologized, but I refused to pay.